Welcome to Cut the COVID Crap Part 94. The sheep paying 40% tax. Have you noticed in the mainstream media that you are supposed to pick a side or something? So, what's the current thing? The Israel-Hamas war. Of course, it's bad what happened before, but if you don't support Israel, then you're an anti-Semite. Really? And if you, on the other hand, if you don't support Palestinians, then you are a Islamophobe. Really? So if you don't support war, so if you're against the Israeli policies and against the Hamas policies, then you are something that you're not supposed to be. That you have to be very much aware of. That it's a very sensitive issue, just like the Ukraine-Russia war before. If you don't support Ukraine, then you support Putin. No, I don't support war in general, and I think it's rather ridiculous to expect that if you support the Ukraine, that you're going to defeat a nuclear world power. It's a bit naive, but you gotta be afraid of, like, if you don't support it, then you're gonna be portrayed as a Russia supporter. If you don't want to get an experimental injection, an experimental medical intervention, then you're an anti-vaxxer, and that is bad apparently. Even though you have had many vaccinations, you're an anti-vaxxer. What is the big deal to be called that? If you don't support Black Lives Matter, then you're a racist. Really? Well, I don't support Black Lives Matter because they justified rioting. I don't justify rioting. That's why I don't support them. If that makes me a racist for some people, I don't care. If random people that you don't know call you a racist, what's the big deal? If 10 years ago somebody called me a racist, would have found it a bigger deal. Or if a friend that knows me well calls me a racist, then get some explanation to do, I guess. But why worry about what random strangers or the mainstream media portrays? If you're not gender affirming, then you're a transphobe. Yeah, well, if you're born with a penis, then you're male, right? If you're born with a vagina, you're female. That's gender affirming enough, I think. If somebody wants to change their gender, as long as it's an adult, it's up to them. What's the big deal? Does that mean that you have to invent 76 pronouns? If you don't adhere to that, and you're supposedly called names by random strangers, even though you can easily explain yourselves to people that are seriously interested, who cares? Climate has changed quite a bit before humans were around, apparently. But now we are in an emergency situation that climate is changing. Really? What's the emergency? It's been colder before? It's been warmer before? Yes, climate change, but you're a climate denier if you don't think that we're in an emergency now and we need to do something about it. I'm against polluting, but man-made climate change, yeah, give me the evidence and I'll believe it, but without evidence, climate does change over time. Yeah, and are we in an emergency? Isn't it a little bit old that there always seemed to be an emergency. There was a COVID emergency when 0.1% of the population died of a disease which is pretty comparable to the flu. I mean, in terms of maybe magnitude 2 or 3 worse or something, but not like 10 times worse. Um, and so there's always in the mainstream media there's something that you're supposed to pick a side for or be worried about. And you know what happens in the meantime? You pay 40% tax, roughly as a general rule in the Western world. So you're very much concerned about what random strangers think of you, and you're supposed to be careful in how you express yourself, and if you even read supposed to be misinformation, then you're a conspiracy theorist, and that's also not something that you want to be called. And in the meantime, I think whoever is behind this, they're laughing. You're worried about being called a racist or be called an anti-Semite, and you're paying 40% tax, and nobody seems to care about it. And in the meantime, the government debts are going to go that high that it's not sustainable anymore. And are we on a way to collapse? I don't know. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I mean, given the extreme levels of government debt as a percentage of GDP is at record highs in the US, more than 100%. Given those levels and now higher interest rates, yeah, it's a lot of interest to be paid, and you can print more money, borrow more money, and at some point it's going to collapse. But you don't hear anything about it in the mainstream media. No, you gotta support a war because it's you gotta defend democracy, right? And send billions and billions of dollars to the Ukraine, so you do the right thing, and the tax that you pay is probably not enough for it. And you know what? The only solution seems to be always is more control, right? Digital central bank digital currencies. Once we have that, then there's no way back. Even though they say like, oh, it's just we'll have it next to cash, right? Next to cash, until cash is not allowed anymore, and then you're stuck. Just like vaccination passport. Yeah, it's just for contact tracing until vaccination is mandatory. Even though you have natural immunity, doesn't matter. Vaccination is mandatory. I've never heard of recovering from a disease and then being forced to get vaccination against it after you recovered. So yeah, I mean, it's simple, right? Avoid the mainstream media, avoid picking a side. If you just don't worry about these things that are printed in the mainstream media, and if you're just nice to people around you, even the ones that have a different opinion, then there's no big deal. And again, even if people disagree with you, I treat people that's the sheep that blindly believe this the mainstream media. Yeah, I treat them as children that believe in Santa. I'm not going to get angry with them. I mean, they believe that in their naivety, and hopefully at some point they grow out of it, and you can have a more proper, in-depth conversation. But I'm not going to get angry with them. But yeah, remember that. Like all the things that you're supposed to be worried about, and in the meantime, 40% tax, and it's not enough. So what's next? Who knows? We cannot look in the future, but picking a side, don't do it. Have good morals, but don't pick a side. Don't pick a side. No use. Anyway, see you next.